and we're kicking off our new series, Bridge Building 101. And you know, I do my best to try and change stuff up and keep things interesting and do some different stuff every now and then. So I decided over the next few weeks we're actually going to do a construction project during church. How does that sound? We've done a lot of different things at church. We've had Sundays where we go out and serve the community. We've had Sundays where we've obviously gathered together and worshiped. We've had Sundays where we've celebrated communion. We've had Sundays at the Mark with another church. We've done a lot of different things, but I don't know that I've ever done a construction project in church. And so that's what we're going to do for the next few weeks. So if you have some tools, you're welcome to bring them along. Or if you just kind of want to watch me, that's fine too. That happens every now and then. But it's a good way to be involved. And today is our introduction to this series. And I want you to think about bridges. Brian gave a really good introduction with the kids. But I want you to think of some different types of bridges. I bet there are more than you realize at this moment. So what are some kind of bridges that you can think of? Don't all go at once.
Covered bridge.
Covered bridge. That's a good one. Others?
Suspension.
Suspension bridge.
Rope bridge.
Rope bridge. Those are the ones that terrify me, by the way. Rope bridge.
Walking bridge.
Walking bridge. We have train bridges, right? Bridges for cars. How about the bridge of your nose? Any billiard fans? We make a bridge when we shoot pool, right? And there's also a bridge cue to help you reach that far off shot. Sometimes when we have two people that we care about and they don't seem to be able to get along, we become a bridge between friends. How about a dental bridge? Covers the gap, right? You guys did really well. You covered most of the bridges that I had. There's two that we missed though. What about the bridge in a musical composition? It strings it together. And the bridge of a ship. An integral part. There's lots of different kinds of bridges. They all have a use. And so we are looking at, oh, I skipped one. I thought maybe I should skip it since we are the Church of God Holiness, but I'm going to throw it out there. There's a card game called Bridge. Now, true Church of God people wouldn't know that because they would have never touched cards. But there's a card game called Bridge. So there's also that bridge. But bridges are really common in our society. They are everywhere we look. In fact, I have driven over bridges and not even realized it until I was passed. Does that happen to you? In fact, the only reason I even realized it was there was the little sign gave me an indication that there was a bridge coming. Bridges are everywhere around us. We don't even stop and think about it. To get into Meadville proper, we have to go across Smock Bridge. That's a joy right now, isn't it? And I know many of us, myself included, have decided to skirt around the back down here and cross that bridge. And all I can think of is that comes out across from Willow Street, and I don't know the name of that bridge. But I use it, and we are waiting for the day that the Mead Avenue Bridge is completed, right? We have three bridges that we use, well, one primarily right now, right? Bridges that we need on a daily basis. If you're going to go up and down 79 towards Cochranton, we cross the bridge over our wetlands. Now, before I moved to Meadville, I referred to that as swamp. But I have been corrected and enlightened, I should say, and helped to understand that those are our wetlands. So if you're going to go down 19 or down 79, we need a bridge to get across the wetlands area. So we have bridges everywhere we look. And bridges do this amazing thing. They allow us to reach some place that we couldn't reach otherwise. They connect 2 points. And they help us pass over something that would be impassable otherwise. Imagine getting across our wetlands, with or without a car, right? We wouldn't do it. We would need a boat, or we would sink. We'd have to go miles around it. Imagine trying to get over the railroad tracks without the bridge. It would be quite dangerous, right? Or trying to get through French Creek. These are not things that we would want to do. And so they help us reach something that would otherwise be impossible to reach. Bridges allow us to move from one place to another while passing over an impassable object. And as I was thinking about that, I was remembering traveling to Florida, and I always go through West Virginia, and as you go through the mountains, you go through over some amazing bridges, and some of the overpasses that you can stop and look down. Guess what? If I had to go down that mountain and up the other side to get to the other side, I would not do it. It would not happen. And I certainly couldn't do it in a matter of moments. It would take me days, maybe weeks, maybe a once-in-a-lifetime journey. Right? Because as I went down, I sure would not be going back. Bridges allow us to connect easily to something that we otherwise would not be able to get to. And so I want you to keep this idea of bridges in mind, because in our faith, faith is the bridge. In following Christ, faith is the bridge that allows us to move somewhere that we could not go otherwise. And I want to share with you this morning Hebrews chapter 11. Our theme verse for this is Hebrews 11:1, but we're going to look at the entire chapter of Hebrews 11 because I think it helps us to see how faith has been a bridge for so many of those who have gone before us. By faith, now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith, Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as a righteous man when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, he still speaks, even though he is dead. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of righteousness that comes by faith. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place that he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Man, that takes faith. It's one of my favorite stories. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. By faith, Abraham, even though he was past age, and Sarah herself was barren, was enabled to become a father because he considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and as countless as the sand on the seashore. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised, they only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, and they admired that they were aliens and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had the opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had received the promise was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead, and figuratively speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions about his bones. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as a greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger he perceived because he saw him who was invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, so that the destroyer and the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith the people passed through the Red Sea as on the dry land. But when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell after the people had marched around them for 7 days. By faith the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to talk about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouth of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead, raised to life again. Others were tortured and refused to be released, so that they might gain a better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, while others were chained and put in prison. They were stoned, they were sawed in two, they were put to death by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains and in caves and holes of the ground. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised. God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. What a list of faith. And for every one of these, faith was their spiritual bridge. Faith moved them to something that they never would have done on their own. I love the story of Abraham. We're going to talk about it more in the coming weeks. But I just have this image of Abraham being out doing what he does when God speaks to him and says, "Go to the land that I will show you." Talk about unclear. Go to where I will show you. You want to give me a geographical direction, God? A little bit of some sort of coordinates, some heading? And he says, go to the land that I will show you. Faith really is our spiritual bridge. Faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. It is easy to have assurance when we see the destination. And most of the time I step foot onto a bridge, I feel pretty confident because, well, I know that there's lots of engineers that have looked at it. I know that somebody has probably gone across before, and I can always see the end in sight. On every bridge but one that I've been on, I can always see the end in sight. Not too bad, right? I know that at some point I'm going to be able to get off the bridge. That's a good step, right? That step off the bridge. But faith and bridges always move us. They help us go from one place to another while passing over something that would otherwise be impassable. If you look at the list here, we have Enoch. He never died. How is that possible? Because we understand how this works, right? At least we think we do. And yet what we're told in the scriptures is that Enoch never died. He was found to be missing. He just went to be with God. I love Noah. That man, because of his faith, he built an ark when they didn't even know what rain was. Think about that. We know that floods occur. But that had never happened. Imagine trying to explain that to your neighbors and to your wife. In fact, they made a movie about that a few years ago, right? It was very difficult in our day. It was very difficult in his day as well. But Noah built an ark because of faith in God. Abraham called to go to the land that God would show him. Sarah called to give birth even though she was too old. Joseph didn't get much of a choice in his bridge, right? He was kind of thrust onto it by his brothers as he was sold into slavery. And yet God was able to use that because Joseph continued to be faithful, and eventually he was able to save his family. Moses led his people out of slavery. The Israelites passed through the Red Sea. Personally, I'm a big fan of the walls of Jericho. They fell by trumpet sound. Imagine that. They fell by trumpet sound. And Rahab risked her life to save the Israelite spies. Every one of these people did something amazing because of their faith in God. Something that they would not have done on their own. And faith made all of these things possible. It allowed them to move from one place to another and to connect with God in a new way. And to do something that not only changed their life, every one of them changed the lives of those around them. Things were different because of what they had done. Now, as we know these stories, we know that for every one of them, it wasn't just a few steps and it was over. It was a long bridge. It was a long walk. And for some of them, their bridge lasted months and years and a lifetime. But their faith in God allowed them to do something that otherwise would have been impossible. I think about that with some of the things that we have done as a church together. The first year we did our mission trip caused a lot of sleepless nights for me. Imagining how we could possibly, as a group of people, take on such a big project, because we know that the weather around here is not always cooperative, right? We were working with a group of volunteers taking on a project that seemed bigger than we could do. And I had this grand idea that maybe we could do more than one project. We could do a few. I love our leadership team because they said, okay. There are many leadership teams that would have just strung their pastor up for that. I just want you to know that. Ours said no. And as I have explored that and explored some of the other things with my spiritual director, he continues to remind me of this amazing thing about faith. Faith takes us to our edge, and then it takes a step further to the edge. And then it takes a step further to the edge. It's the same thing with building this bridge of faith. It takes us further than we ever thought we would go. Johnny mentioned the rope bridges. That is the one that's tough for me. Give me a good cement bridge. Give me a good steel bridge. I'm feeling pretty confident driving my car across it. Give me a rope bridge, and I am hanging on for dear life. Now, I weigh a lot less than a car. I weigh a whole lot less than 2 cars or semis or trains. And so I feel pretty good about that. And you would think that I would know that the engineers who built the rope bridge, it's probably pretty safe. But if I have to go across the rope bridge, do you know what I'm doing? My knees are shaking, and I am holding those sides for dear life. Now, it's all connected, right? So if part of it goes, it's all going to go. But I feel better assuming that if I hold on for dear life, that it's going to be okay. Faith is not for the faint of heart. And our graphic was not what I had originally envisioned. What I had pictured is what we usually picture when we talk about growing with faith in God. A nice, calm, serene environment. In my mind, I had a grassy field and a beautiful stream flowing behind it and a little bridge that went across. Almost enough that I could leap it if I were in better shape, but I'm not, so I would use the bridge. But that small of a stream and a little bridge just going behind it, birds singing, maybe some cows off to the side, beautiful picturesque scenery behind it. And I thought, oh, faith in God, building bridges right there. And I shared this with our graphic design person, James, and he said, okay, he said, let me see what I come up with. And then he texted back and said, hey, I found this really cool bridge in Pittsburgh. What do you think? I thought, well, that's not what I was thinking at all. Because for me, when we step on a faith journey with God, a bridge with God, isn't it always perfect? Isn't it always serene and calm and we are fully prepared? James, this looks like chaos. This looks scary. In fact, I'm not even sure that I want to go there. Now, I love to go to Pittsburgh now. It's not such a big deal. But when I learned to drive, that was terrifying. Guess what? Sometimes that bridge of faith, it's not in calm, serene nature. It's actually filled with chaos on one side and it looks scary on the other. And it's why walking across it is so difficult. It's not always the romantic image that we want it to be. It's not always free of distraction and free of chaos. It's in the midst of noise. It's in the midst of problems. And it's in the midst of everything else we do. And as I look back through all of the people that we read about in Hebrews 11, the reason their faith journey is so important is not because they were off on their own just seeking God, seeking enlightenment. They were in the midst of everyday life when God called them, when God spoke to them and said, go. And the same thing continues to be today. It's not when we are completely alone and focused and quiet that God calls us to step out. Sometimes it's in the midst of everyday life. I don't believe that Abraham was sitting around waiting for the day that God would call him to something different. I think Abraham was in the midst of his everyday activities. He was doing what he did on an everyday basis when God called him and said, all of a sudden, leave everything that you know and go to the land that I will show you. I don't think how do you like that, Moa? It's a cross of Moses and Noah. Moses ran away from Egypt. He was not sitting out in the wilderness praying that God would just send him back to deliver the people from Egypt, or from slavery. Noah was definitely not sitting around contemplating building his own boat anyway. And God just asked him to build a bigger one. They were doing what they did on a regular basis when God called them and said, hey, are you willing to step onto a bridge that will change your life? What I love is that they all said yes. And faith requires action. I have looked at many bridges, but the only time I've ever been able to go across them is if I've taken a step forward and another step forward. And this is kind of our intro today. I want you to be thinking about this because these great men and women of the Scriptures, they took a step forward. They went to the edge. And then they took another step forward and they went to the edge. And they ended up doing something that they never believed could happen. And I think that God is still calling men and women to take steps of faith today. In fact, I will tell you that I believe the steps that we are taking this summer are some steps that God has called us to take. When I look at the Scrabble run that's approaching, it's getting close enough that sleepless nights are starting to occur. And I'm saying, God, are you sure this is what you want? We can still cancel. No, we can't. No, we can't, right? God, this is bigger than what we should be able to do. God, are you really sure that this is where you're leading? And what I continue to hear back is yes. I look at the Color Dash. It's another big event. And as I put these two things side by side, and I look at our group that makes up Cornerstone, I say, God, can we really do this? Not on our own. Not on our own. But with God, anything is possible. And I share that not because I believe in cliches. In fact, I despise cliches. I share that because as I've watched the men and women of the Scriptures, they did stuff that was way too big for them only because God allowed them to do it. And as I look at our history as a church, we have done things bigger than us, not because we are great and should be patted on the back, but because God is great and has enabled us to walk with Him and do it. And so building bridges, it takes us to some place that we may not ever dream about, doing something we're not sure we want to do because God has asked us to do it. I don't think about running a 5K because I love to run. I don't ever run. Ever. I sprint occasionally now when I need to catch the kids. And if I can do it in 2 to 3 steps, that's really cool. And I'm not proud of this, but I'm going to share it anyway because I like you guys to know that I'm human too. The other day I had the kids outside and Alex started running towards the neighbor's yard. And I was on the mower. I was doing some stuff with the mower, so I shut the deck off and I chased him down on the lawnmower. Now I did get off the lawnmower and pick him up. I didn't drive by and get him that way. But if you've seen our yard, we have a rather large front yard, and he was most of the way across it, and I was pretty sure that I could catch him before he made it all the way. And it was either get off and run or just chase him down at 5 miles an hour on the mower. And the mower did it. It worked. That's the part you'll remember from this, isn't it? Pastor Jamie chased Alex down on the mower. Okay. But it's taking steps to go someplace that we never imagined God calling us to go. One thing I love about building a bridge with God is that God always builds it with us. He doesn't ask us to do it on our own. He doesn't ask us to just figure it out. He doesn't give us the full blueprints, but he asks us to walk with him step by step and to follow. It is never easy, but the results are always amazing. And so I would encourage you over the next few weeks to really begin to pray. To pray for the stuff that we're doing as a church, to pray for me as your pastor, but to also pray personally and say, God, okay, here we are, we're talking about building bridges. God, what are you asking me to do? Where are you asking me to go? God, what steps do I need to take so that I am obedient in this time and in the days to come? God, help me to hear you, because sometimes with all of the noise around me, with all of the chaos in my life, with all of the things that I think need to happen, with all of the items on my to-do list, God, I don't always hear you. So help me to hear you in the noise. And God, sometimes when I've heard you, you've scared me, because you've asked me to do something that I wouldn't normally do. God, help me to trust you to do it. Bridge building is not for the faint of heart. Whether you are building real physical bridges that you can drive a car or a train over, or whether you are building spiritual bridges that not only change our life but the lives of those around us, it's not for the faint of heart. But the really cool is we have the best foreman out there. And God will work with us every step of the way. And so I'm going to close this morning. And I'm going to ask you to stay a moment in that prayer. God, where are you leading? What bridge are you asking me to build, God? What steps do I need to take so that I am obedient to you in this time? And part 2, God, help me have the faith to follow you. Let's pray. Father, you hear our hearts. You know us well. You love us. Father, we just believe that you created us and know us better than we even know ourselves. God, you know how easy it is to be scared, to doubt, and to just go about our daily lives. Father, help us to hear you. Help us to catch what you are trying to do in our lives and right around us. God, calm any fears that we might have, and help us to trust you each and every step of the way. God, thank you for today. Thank you for this time together. Thank you for people who love you and who do their best to walk with you each and every moment. And God, I pray for the events that we believe you've given us to do this summer. The Scrabble Run, Vacation Bible School, Color Dash. God, we just lift these up. We know that they are bigger than we can do on our own. And so, God, we ask for your guidance. We ask for your direction. We ask that you help us as we follow you faithfully. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.